All right. Let me just check to see if we're actually live. It's a little, okay. We are good to go. Awesome. Uh, so let's see. Thanks for coming on, Domer. I think I reached out to you on X, and I just kind of reached out to you. I saw your account. I've been following your account. You've been active in the prediction market space for since 2007. I'm one of the first predictors, and I just I wanted to contact you, kind of interview, and I'm super psyched that you're on and that you're available to talk about prediction markets. So yeah, I think we discussed kind of just having kind of like a general conversation about kind of like the current state of prediction markets, where we are right now, but also like some more interesting markets that you've been looking at, and especially in terms of the Japanese markets. That's kind of like an overview, I think, of what we were talking about. So yeah, just curious to get your take on those, and if you'd like to kind of introduce yourself, and we can kind of kick things off from there.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate what you were doing, like interviewing people. It's really cool what you're doing in the space. But yeah, so I've been doing it since 2007, which is now like a lifetime ago. And it was just such a smaller thing back then, and even as it progressed, like it never really got very big. It was only like maybe 2021 that things started kicking off, and then 2024 is when it all went bonkers. So it's a very very different world than when I started for sure.
Yeah, and in terms of like the changes that you've seen, right? Like I saw in the space, right? Is for years it's been political markets, and like some cultural, but mostly like election markets, right? Election markets and sports. As we've kind of changed, as the prediction market industry has grown from where you've seen it, um, what have kind of been the new markets that are emerging that are exciting to you, right? Like, are we moving out of like only election markets on PMs, right? Because that's still the highest liquidity. There's a lot of liquidity there. I mean, we have like the interest rate markets as well. But do you see any other markets kind of on the horizon, or something that could be bigger than maybe election markets, in terms of how things are changing?
I, I mean, so the two different answers to that question. Number one, I would say the difference with election market is just how much wider it is. Like if you think about what prediction markets were like 10 years ago, maybe there's a random election in Italy and maybe, there's 100,000 in volume and like, 80 traders or whatever. Now, if you look at that, like maybe the volume is 20 times that and the number of traders is 50 times that. It's the breadth of what we have markets on is just so much wider, and it encompasses like so many more interesting things that are happening in the world, because it's not just what happens in the US is important, but it's not all encompassing. Like what happens in Japan or Italy or Israel or whatever, like these are all really important things that affect other people. And so it's really cool that prediction markets are just kind of starting to trickle into all of these non-US, non-Western Europe type of events going on in the world. So that's cool. And what was the second thing was about like the types of markets. So I think like one thing to me that's going to get a lot bigger, and it's already really big, is kind of economic markets. So if you think about how big financial markets are, like these are obviously trillions, multi-trillions of dollars, and then just derivatives, and people are predicting interest rates and default swaps. It's so complex and so intricate, and like just the dollar amounts are just gargantuan. And a lot of what they're doing when they trade these derivatives are just kind of like forecasting like what's going to happen. And sometimes it's not a very clean way to do it. Sometimes it's a very convoluted, complex. I think if you remember the movie The Big Short, when that came out, they took like a pause, like there was like some celebrity in a bathtub who was like explaining credit default swaps or something, because it
Oh
was
yeah.
like you couldn't even do the movie without explaining this intricate instrument that they were using. So what prediction markets do is so clean. Like, will there be a recession? Yes or no? You don't need to bet on bond rates in 2027 and figure out what Jerome Powell is going to do. Like it's just a very clean way to, yes, there's going to be a recession. No, there's going to be a recession. So these markets, these economic markets, are already really big, and they're only going to get bigger. And the Fed markets are already big, and they're only going to get bigger. So I think economics is like the main near term growth point for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there too, because I've seen like I feel like the Fed market is like about to surpass the election markets, just in terms of volume, and it makes sense. It makes sense to what you were saying. And in a sense, not only is it like a fun kind of thing that you can predict, like who's going to win, who's going to do this, but it's like a legit hedge. It's a very real economic tool that people are piling into. So I think that there's a huge amount of growth there, in terms of just I agree with you there. I'm curious too, like, so I was having a thought the other day, and this kind of gets into a philosophical kind of conversation. But I was having a thought the other day that like prediction markets, they've been in this niche category, right, for a long time, but they're scaling up, and as they scale up, my kind of and this kind of piggybacks on a tweet that I saw you post, I think a couple days ago. But do you like right now you forecast with Polymarket, it's like 95% accurate in a lot of cases. Do you think that this will continue as it scales? Like, do you think there's, and it's a broad question because it gets into insider trading, it gets into, how easily these markets can be manipulated. But do you think that at some point we might see a divergence of maybe like, prediction markets accuracy rating is not totally there, right? Maybe this was a factor of certain markets being so niche. I'm curious to get your take on what you think, kind of like the future of these markets are as they scale.
Yeah. So just to go back to economics, because I feel like that's a very good question, and it's like a complicated question that we as humans are getting a lot better at predicting the future. If you think about the business cycle, like this is something you study in economics, like people that grew up a long time ago, they learned that there was a boom, there was a bust. The stock market would go up, the stock market would go down, there would be recessions, constant recessions. Well, what we kind of like solved in the past, little while in terms of managing monetary policy is there's rarely a recession. Like a recession is now like an aberration, right? And people have been predicting a recession within the current economy for a long time now, and COVID aside, and they've been wrong. So we've been a lot better as human beings in general in terms of like forecasting and figuring out what's going to happen. Like we use numbers so much more intelligently than we have in the past. So I guess that's kind of like the really like deep overview of the question. As far as prediction markets in general, yeah, I do think they will continue on an upward trajectory because I mean it's nuanced because on the one hand, every single market that we predict is unprecedented in some way. There's some dimension to it that is impossible to forecast, that is new, we're not repeating the same things over and over again. Even events that are repeating, that are elections, there's a different variable, there's different quotients, there's so many different things. So everything we're doing is unique. So in that sense, there probably is some sort of upper level to which we can get an accuracy level. But like on at a more like root level in terms of how we're forecasting, like I feel like the trajectory is going to continue to be upward in terms of us like learning all of these dimensions and learning how to forecast and learning how to be better. Like if you just think about me as a trader, right? If you took me in 2025 and put me in a time machine and I landed in 2008 and put me in a prediction market, pretend that they're super liquid, like I would just my knowledge of numbers and forecasting and regression, and like nobody was doing any of this. Like nobody cared. It was like, oh, I think this person looks good on TV, like that's going to be what it is. It's like, no, we're just so much smarter about all the dimensions that go into what this determines whether people vote or whether there's a recession or whatever. Like it's just we're a lot smarter, and so I think that trajectory will continue to grow. And I think prediction markets are not only a reflection of that, but that they can help facilitate it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting too because we're getting into this kind of area of how much are prediction markets affecting society, right? And I go back to that Bill Ackman tweet that I've talked about before, and it's just like where he was like basically requesting that Eric Adams drop out of the Polymarket. So I'm like thing that I'm really curious about, and I asked you a little bit about this, and I think in the chat, but I'm curious about like how much do you think predictions these markets are going to start affecting policy? Now, on the one hand, it's like they might not affect policy any more than like the stock market does or anything like that, but they're certainly not affecting it to the extent that the stock market is affecting things now or the equities markets are affecting things currently. And I think what we might see and what I want to ask you is kind of like going into 2026 and then 2028, especially with these election cycles. Like, what do you think? uh, Do you think prediction markets are going to have more of an effect on how policy is kind of on how politics kind of unfolds, right? Where it's not just predicting, but now making the actual political events occur.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really smart question, and it's one that I'm not sure that I have the answer to. But I could talk about a couple of things, which is, number one, and it actually relates to today. If like it was back in maybe 2011 or so, and there was a really huge bet that came in on Donald Trump to be the nominee. So this is 2012. So for the 2012 nomination, and he was not considered any type of factor. Even nobody cared. Nobody knew about it at all. And so this bet was just like so strange. And they took the odds from like 1 to 2% to like 10% or something like that. And there was just a ton of money behind it. And I forgot about it for a long time. And then I remember I think I read something or somebody, it might have been Michael Cohen, as he was going to prison, like he revealed that Trump was seriously considering running in 2012. So that's a really long roundabout way to answer your question, which is that like, he probably, it was either him or his buddy, like put all of this money to like increase the perception that he was a legit nominee, right? And so he was trying to kind of influence the baseline case, like, okay, if Trump announces and he's already at 20% in these prediction markets, maybe people take him a lot seriously. Maybe he's booked on CNN or what, whatever. Like the, there's a way in which these events kind of like correlate and feed into each other. So I think it's a really, really smart question, and one that we kind of have to figure out and grapple with, the degree to which you can influence the real world by changing the prices on prediction markets and then thereby changing the perception of those events.
Yeah, that is crazy, and I do think we're going to see more of that. Like I feel like that's and it's the unique thing about prediction markets because it ties into all of these kind of events that aren't just like purely will stock go up, like what will this perform, but now it's like how is this person is this person going to get elected or not, and what's going to sway the markets, I think is super fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to dovetail onto that, so much of what we're doing is, qualitative, not quantitative, right? That's judgment. It's things like who's gonna win a nomination, which is decided by tens of millions of people. So, yeah,
Yeah, kind of getting into that too. When it comes to judgment, you've been in this space forever, and I think, I'm sure you've gotten asked this question before, but I'd like to ask it just because it has to be asked. What do you think the best kind of judgment traits of a predictor are in this space? Like, what are the traits that make a good prediction trader? What are the traits that make a really bad prediction trader? In kind of your opinion.
ooh, yeah, okay. So I'm thinking of two things that kind of, because that's a very complex question. Also, one where I'm not sure that I have the answer, but I think there's a couple clues. And number one is like their ability to react to news. So, there could be news that comes in, like, we'll just stick with politics. Like, let's say there's some big scandal, and, you have to figure out whether this is real or not, whether you move the price from 20 to 15 or 20 to 19. And if you overreact, you cost yourself money, or maybe the scandal does nothing and maybe the person goes to 22. So reacting to new news is like a very important thing, and something that I kind of like look at to see if somebody is good or not. And then the second thing, and you can really only figure this out by talking to people, is like how married to their ideas are they, and how open are they to them being wrong, right? And I think that's such an important like factor in like a really good prediction market trader, is being open, being at least receptive to being wrong. And when you chat with people and it's like they're impervious to what you're saying, even if you're just coming up with like nonsense, like or whatever, that they're just like unswayed and they're just not moving at all. It's like, is this person like trying to predict the event, or have they already decided kind of how they want it to end or how they think it's going to end, and they're just backfilling all their reasons in with their bias, right? So I think openness to being wrong is like a really important trait, and you can figure that out by chatting with people. And I chat with a lot of people all the time, and I'm frequently asking their opinion, and that's like something that I would like value very, very highly in someone that I was chatting with.
And like so kind of piggybacking on that. So like what when I look at a market, lately, I'm kind of new to prediction markets. And the way I've been going into prediction markets is just it's probably the worst way you can do it. It's just vibe. It's like, okay, like, because that's how because eventually, like when I was trading perps, that's like vibe actually worked, right? Eventually you're watching the charts, you watch the charts enough, you get a feel for the market, and you can kind of make bets. Like you feel things are getting bearish a little bit, right? Because you can see it in the charts. And that's just because you're watching that chart so much. With prediction markets, it's harder, right? Because it's news based, or at least I feel like it's news based. You're watching the news, or you're trying to take in all this contextual information. What like when you approach a market, what do you think gives you an edge? Is it the fact that you've just kind of like you've been following these events so much, you just have a lot of experience in following these events, or do you actually do deep dives before you do every market, before you get into a market? Like at this point, what is your process when you kind of look at something?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in that question. Not criticism. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So I think the first thing, I think one of my skills is being able to kind of have a rough idea of what a market is worth right away, and whether that's experience or just something innate. Like I'm not like some super genius or anything. So I've been doing it a long time. So I guess maybe it's probably due to experience that I can kind of get a price that's close to correct right away. And then I think, you know, you kind of scale into markets based on how much research you're doing. So I would be very comfortable just pulling up to a market and putting, $100 in and just being like, okay, it doesn't really matter if I do research. But if I'm pulling up to a market and it's like, I think this price may be wrong, like I may do a lot of research, and then after that, a lot of research, I'll bet a lot of money. What were the other parts of that question? I feel like I'm losing the track a bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's about it. I think basically I was just trying to kind of gauge, what your process is before entering into a market. And
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I think you did say something that was really interesting, which is about vibes, and I feel like, because we were talking about the politics and stuff. Like, I think one important thing of like betting on politics is kind of like you're trying to anticipate the next vibe, right? So it's like it's very easy to describe, like for instance, in the Democratic nomination for 2028 right now, like Gavin Newsom's really high, like ludicrously high, like Rudy Giuliani levels of high. Like people are just positive that this guy's going to be, um, if not the nominee, at least like one of the top two. So that's the current vibe. It's very easy to describe. But what's harder to figure out is like, okay, where are we going to be at like 6 months from now? Like, is Newsom still going to be that thing, or is it going to be someone new, or are we going to like, is Mom Donnie going to change the thinking of Democrats? It's like, is Mom Donnie going to give this great speech, and then the Democrats are going to be like, oh my gosh, we should maybe veer towards the AOC wing, and that'll be the next meme, is like AOC being ascendant. So it's kind of like anticipating the next vibe is very important and especially like trying to protect like nominees and stuff.
Yeah, and it's and Gavin Newsom, like it's funny you brought that up as an example because Gavin Newsom is like a huge vibe, right? He was yeah, like a few weeks ago he was all over Twitter with the I think there was like what were they calling it? Like dark woke or something like that. I don't know. He was being
Yeah,
like
something.
memed all around, and it was just like dark woke memes of Gavin Newsom. And that's actually when you saw that price spike. I remember that very vividly. That you saw that you could go onto Polymarket, you could see his as his mind share was increasing, his volume was increasing on Polymarket. And the other day we saw, like I think that that's a very interesting approach to political markets, like you were saying, because the other day we saw, we had that debate in New York. I haven't checked the markets, but maybe have you ever played debates? Like, is there a way to play vibe off debates, or do you not see a huge movement in that category?
Okay, so I would say 95% of debates are not important, but in the 5% of debates where they are important, they become like increasingly like just like all-encompassingly important. If you think about the Biden Trump debate, that ended a presidential that not only did it end his campaign, it kind of tarnished his whole presidency. And that was just like 2 hours sitting down on TV. So that was gargantuan. And then the other very easy example to think of is Rick Perry stumbling over a few words, and he went from literally the front runner to dropping out of the race in like a very short amount of time. So, I mean, most debates are not very useful. Don't really change the momentum that much, but when it does, like you have to be ready to pounce because that the number could change dramatically in the span of a couple hours.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a really uh, cool observation. I think it's just having that knowledge and knowing that okay, like most of the time, debates not going to affect much, but on the times they do, it's going to affect it huge.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's uh, so I wanted to. So so going back to your tweet, I saw that you tweeted out a little bit about Polymarket and kind of like the future of Polymarket, how the current valuation is not anywhere close to what the end valuation is going to be, in your opinion. And then you had a little bit to say about the Polymarket token as well. I'm wondering if you want to kind of talk about it here a little, kind of elaborate on what you think the next phase for Polymarket is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just think about it in the sense that number one, obviously, I think Polymarket is a good thing. It's important. It's going to grow, and so if I'm thinking that, and I think it's going to grow, and then I'm thinking about a token, the token that they implement will likely have like material usage on a site that is very important. So eh, most of these tokens that protocols launch like are not very useful. Like it's not that important. But if the Polymarket token kind of is the determiner of whether they this way or that way, if it replaces UMA, I have no idea if it will. But this is one hypothetical usage of the token is to replace UMA and kind of be the determiner of whether something is X or Y when the market expires. So in that sense, I feel like the potential for the token to have usefulness and be something that people want to have and acquire and have a lot of, to me, yeah, it feels like a very low number in terms of the future potential of the site. I mean, 10 years from now, maybe there's a world where Polymarket doesn't exist or it's tiny, but a lot of the scenarios 10 years from now is Polymarket as a gargantuan company. So in terms of like me making a bet, taking risk, like yeah, I would want to put money on Polymarket right now.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's markets for everything. That's what it comes down to. And I feel like that narrative is just going to take off. I have a suspicion that and I kind of hinted at this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but I have a suspicion that we're going to move away from the prediction narrative, like forecasting, and move into the markets for everything narrative. That's just my hunch, but I don't know if you completely disagree with that or not, or what you think the focus is going to be for these prediction market platforms as they continue to market themselves. But that's kind of, I don't know. I feel like there's, and so again, a complicated question. I apologize, but kind of
Yeah, I mean that would be above my pay grade as far as what what they get into beyond prediction markets. I'm just kind of focused on my own thing, which is, trying to predict these stupid events happening across the world.
yeah, yeah. I kind of have this leading into this other question that I want to ask you is you've kind of seen so we've kind of seen insider trading start to scale up on prediction markets. Like we've where there's this. I was talking to the Polysites guys, and they were talking about their insider finder tool, and I'm just wondering like you've probably seen your fair share of manipulation as you've started in this space. Do you see it increasing? Like, do you see it kind of like, are you seeing it more often now? And do you think that there are going to be mechanisms in place to deal with it? Or do you think it's going to, like, how do you see it affecting the future of the space?
Yeah, I think there has to be mechanisms in place to deal with it. So how soon that comes, I have no idea, but it just seems like the logical endpoint. It cannot be a thing for, centuries to come that people can just randomly trade on stuff that they know. But I think, insider trading, it's a really hard thing to figure out because it's actually impossible to know if the person is an insider or not unless you literally track the money to an exact person and you find out that they had this information. Because if you like, let's take a recent example of somebody came in, signed up, I think the day before Mayor Adams dropped out of the race for the mayoral race, and somebody bet a bunch of money that he would drop out, I think by the end of September, and they won that bet maybe the next day. And that looks like an insider. And maybe it is an insider. Maybe it is even 95% an insider, but maybe it's someone who found out something, right? Maybe they were at a Kinko's and they saw that somebody had printed out something like a resignation. I mean, who knows? There's so many variables and there's so many vectors where someone could have figured out that Mayor Adams was dropping out of the race and not necessarily someone nefarious or, his wife is already, he's not married, but like, his family member or whatever. So I think it's really, really hard to disentangle what is like smart people who have figured things out. Let's take another example, which is the like Israeli bombings. People tend to make money on those a few hours before they happen. Now, is that somebody who lives near an airport and's like seeing all this activity and they're like, okay, they're about to bomb something, this is not rocket science? Or is it actually like somebody high up in the military who's like, well, I'm not being paid enough for all this shit, like, let me make some more supplemental income? It's so hard to figure out like what is knowledge like that's actually useful and this is great, this is exactly what prediction markets are for, or it's somebody just trying to take advantage of people.
Yeah, yeah, and the rise of the AI tools has gotten like crazy too. Like the initial draw for me when I first got into prediction markets for like, I got into it recently. The initial reason I got in was because I'm like, oh, well, Jane Street isn't like, or BlackRock isn't arbitraging the market, and like, it's a completely open space. There's less market manipulation in prediction markets than there is in maybe, the crypto perps markets. I'm curious to get your take on this too. Like, first, do you use any AI tools right now? Are you using like AI tools to help you? And do you believe that we're going to see a rise of like AI agents in prediction markets that are like better at forecasting than normal traders? They've been training on tons of prediction market data. Uh, You know, I'm curious to get your take on what you think the future of AI in prediction markets is.
I mean, right now AI is just kind of like an assistant, and I think we're very. I mean, very is a loose term, but we're not close currently with the current technology to getting an AI agent who could beat a human. They're just too stupid, and they make too many errors, and they're they just think about problems in very predictable ways. And so, I think yes, I use AI, but you have to be very. It's almost like holding the AI's hand and kind of guiding it and being like, no, 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 what you have just said is completely wrong. Like, think about it this totally different way. So it's like an assistant. That's how I would view it. And an AI agent today would just be terrible. But you know, as far as the future, yes, I do think obviously if we're building this super intelligent thing, it's going to be better at us eventually than predicting the future. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, this gets into a lot of complex questions, but yeah, the future of these is probably more and more usage of AI.
Interesting. We have a comment in the chat. Someone, so I know we talked a little bit about this in our Twitter DMs, but you were kind of looking at some less sought after markets right now that are super interesting. Kind of getting back to the idea of like maybe there's election markets other than the United States. Um, and so I was wondering, and one of the markets you mentioned was Japan. So I'm just wondering, like, what markets are you looking at right now that are kind of undersought, that you find super interesting?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good. I mean, I would probably have to scroll through my profile. I'm not. It's hard to think of things like undersought offhand. But if we can briefly talk about Japan, so I think one thing that's kind of interesting to me, and one thing that has appealed to me is like being a market maker on these sites is you're kind of like forced to put up odds on stuff that you have maybe no opinion about, maybe have not cared about a single second in your life until you've decided to put up these offers. And so, you know, you're being exposed to a lot of new things. And most of the time it's like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I'll put up some offers and, have a small position. And then once in a while it's like, okay, this is actually kind of cool. Like maybe I'm like discovering this new thing and all of a sudden you're betting a lot on this esoteric thing that you had previously no knowledge of. And I think the Japan election is actually a really good example of that. There was actually a huge shock I think it was a couple weeks ago, the big favorite to win the nomination of this party, which is like basically the equivalent of the Conservative Party. Um, the big favorite lost, and the underdog won. I think she was like 15%, like literally 60 seconds before they announced her name. I think she was trading at 15%. So there was this big kind of shocking twist, and she became the leader of the party. And then there was a secondary market to this, like who's going to become the next prime minister. Now, if they had elected a totally normal person, this person is 99.99999% to become the next prime minister. But because they had elected this kind of unexpected, more conservative person, to me, you know, I've traded so many of these world events that it's like when you choose someone that's a little bit outside of the norm, the odds of people rejecting that are a little bit higher. Like maybe they're not astronomically high, but they're materially higher than zero. And so I started betting quite a lot that she would not become prime minister. And this was after she had just won. It was like literally in the minutes right afterwards. And I was chatting with like super like Japanese experts, and they were telling me, "Oh, this is a stupid bet. Like 99.9, yeah, nobody ever rejects it, et cetera, et cetera." And I was like, "This doesn't even make any sense. Like what they're saying, it's just like, oh, this is how we've done it in the past, so this is how it's going to continue in the future." But it's like I'm thinking about events like I've seen this play out like in other countries. Like it's not easy. Like sometimes it takes a little tug and pull to like get this across the finish line, and that's exactly what has happened. So this woman that I bet, I think one of the bets was 1,000 to 1 that she would. I think it was like some absurd, maybe like $25 to win 25,000 that she would not become the prime minister. And so she was at 99.9, and I think at the lowest point she was at 75%. That was like maybe a few days ago. I think now she's bounced back because she's kind of like coalesce things. But it was just interesting the degree to which even like super experts in Japan were kind of rejecting of exactly what ended up playing out. So yeah, that was an interesting market, and I knew nothing about Japanese politics 2 weeks ago. So, and now I feel like I probably can talk with an expert and be like, know exactly what they're talking about.
How did you find these experts? Did you just like, was it just like in the comments, or do you actually have to like dig deep and like call people
Oh
up?
yeah, I'm not in the comment. No, there are no experts in the. Do not go to the comments if you want to find
That's what I
experts.
would do.
No, no, no. I mean, you just kind of, you know, there's a degree to which you have to research it. Like you have to put in work. It's not just like, there's some list somewhere on the internet that lists all the experts you can contact on a topic. You have to kind of you have to kind of weed your way through it and figure it out. And that's another thing that's like really important even in US politics is being able to, sift through people and figure out what people know what they're talking about and which people are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like the exploration of these new markets, I feel like I tweeted about this a while ago when I was just getting into it. But I really do feel like the people on prediction markets like yourself are going to become like the next political, like super political experts. Like, because it's just there's so much incentive to just start like digging into these new markets and just researching them. And I just feel like, already there's more information that you probably have than a lot of other people. So I think it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's less so me as a or like any single trader, and it's more so just like, the amalgamation or, the combination of everything that we're doing. So I think more and more you're gonna see people like paste these odds and be like, okay, this is actually probably a pretty close representation of what reality is. Like, as I'm looking at the screen right now, like Takaichi is at like 95%. Like maybe if God were to come down from heaven, he would say, well, no, she's 92%. Like, okay, we don't have it exact, but we're getting really close.
What kind of piggybacking on that, and I know we're coming short on time here. I know you have a hard stop soon. But piggybacking off of that, what accounts are you following right now in terms of traders? Like who do you think are some really interesting traders in the space, and what is impressing you about them?
um, I mean, I don't really do that. Not that I'm not impressed by other people. Obviously, there are a lot of other impressive people in this space, but I don't think that I'm really tracking what other people are doing necessarily. And I also think that I'm not trying to call it a stupid question or anything, but I feel like that's also a road that you don't necessarily want to go down is depending on what other people are saying or kind of like relying on other people. Like it can be a bad road to go down in terms of like not thinking through the problems yourself, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen a few copy trading apps and prediction markets where basically the business model is follow other traders. I don't know how successful that would be in a prediction market versus like um, like normal, just kind of follow like wallet following. But I have noticed that people have gotten annoyed at that. Like I've noticed that some traders do get actually quite annoyed when you follow their trades. Um, I'm curious as to why, but I don't know if you've seen the same thing or if you've like heard of any of these copy trading apps or what your opinion is of them.
Yeah, I mean, number one, it doesn't bother me. Number two, like if this became like a prolific like thing, like there's a degree to which we're doing very serious things in prediction markets. Like what is gonna happen? Like let's get the right price. Like I need to make profits here. Like you're thinking about things in a very logical and way. But the other facet of prediction markets is this kind of like a game, and if there was an app that was copying all my trades, like I would try to game the shit out of that app. Like I would put in fake trades and get it to spike the price and then bet against the app. And so there's ways to which you can literally like go to combat against somebody that's trying to stalk you like that and kind of trick them and manipulate them. And not that I'm suggesting that you do nefarious things, but it's like, if someone is gonna put in some automated thing that kind of replicates what I'm doing, like I'm going to try to take advantage of that. I'm not just going to sit by while it takes advantage of me.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, do you think it's more or less like, do you think prediction markets and trading in prediction markets is more or less competitive than maybe trading, than you know, do you think its incentives are more aligned? Do you think than maybe traders in
Oh
normal
yes,
equities
yes,
markets or
yeah.
perps market?
Oh, not yes, unbelievably more competitive because first of all, in an equity market, almost everyone is in the same direction, which is up. Okay, now they may differ on what stock is going up, or if you think about crypto, almost everyone is on up. There are very few people that are shorting, and then even amongst the shorters, it's very sporadic. So I think the 0 to 100 nature of prediction markets and the mono on like if I'm making a trade, somebody is on the other side of that. Now, they're not like a real life enemy, but within the context of this market, they are now my enemy, right? This person disagrees with me. I think they're wrong. Like f this person, like et cetera, et cetera. So prediction markets are mono a mono and they're very competitive, and you also measure yourself against your peers quite a lot. Not that I'm like obsessed with being number one or anything, but it's like relative to my peers, am I doing okay, et cetera. So there's a lot of benchmarking as well. So I do think it's very competitive, and I also think the competition is important and makes everyone better.
Yeah, yeah, the competition is good in the space, and then the platforms are competitive as well, right? I mean, like Kalshi, Polymarket, very competitive. All the prediction markets are, and I think that that's actually a boon for the space. I agree with
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I was listening
Um,
to a podcast the other day with actually the CEO of Kalshi, Tariq, and he was talking about the degree to which, yeah, the competition has been toxic, and yeah, et cetera, et cetera. But he also said, the competition has been a good thing probably for both companies, because you have to be on your game. If you have this other company that's stalking you, or if company A, even if you think about just Uber versus Lyft or some other dimension, that in any space, if you have somebody that's right behind you and trying to beat you, like you have to get up at 5 minutes earlier than you did the previous day. Like you have to work hard. So I think there's something to that, in terms of like both companies kind of like making each other better.
cool. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. So okay, so last question before you have to dip out. Just wondering, what do you think is right now underexplored in the prediction market space? What do you think could be added to it in terms of like tech or platforms or it anything really?
Okay,
Like
so
yeah.
this answer is going to be maybe a little bit controversial, but I think one thing that hasn't been solved in prediction markets is how the hell do we figure out these rule fights? And they're so messy and they're becoming bigger, and we're not really coming up with a good solution. And I feel like one dimension that would help us kind of, I don't want to say solve it, but at least improve it, would be kind of exiting the 0 to 100 mindset in every single market, right? So 99% of markets, there's no dispute. It's very clear. This person won the election. They were inaugurated. There's no fight whatsoever. But in the 1% of markets where there's actually a fight and there's tons of money on the line and animosity is increasing, like maybe the correct answer is 50, right? Like maybe we actually don't know. This is a very uncertain thing and we're not sure what the answer is. Like, and maybe the most fair way to handle this is to expire it at a price that is 50, or maybe even 25 or 75, if we think, okay, there's actually a lot of evidence, maybe not 100% evidence, but there's a lot of evidence, so maybe let's expire this at 75. Or is maybe like, okay, there's a little bit of evidence, there's not zero, there's a little bit, so maybe we expire it at 25. And I think we kind of have to be okay with uncertainty, and okay that maybe there are some questions where we will forever disagree. And because like if you think about rule fights from like 5 years ago, and it me versus someone else, for instance, and we talk about this rule fight 5 years later, we probably still think exactly what we thought 5 years ago. Like nobody's mind is really being changed by these things. So I think the 0 to 100 framework is great for prediction markets, but it's very bad when it's actually unclear who has won and a rule fight begins.
Yeah, that's very interesting, I think, and it's a huge issue with prediction markets right now. Is just how we kind of manage these rules,
Yeah, I mean,
basically.
yeah. Sorry,
Um,
one last thing, because if you think about a new user to prediction markets, okay, so they have just signed up for Polymarket or whatever, and they're like betting on this market, and it's like, okay, will this happen? And they've put their whole account on it. Let's say it's $20, and then they come back a few hours later, and it's like, oh, okay, I think this happened. This should be. I'm going to cash my money out, and it's like, oh no, 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 this not only didn't happen, but my $20 is now worth zero. And let me figure out what happened. Oh, there's this gray box and there's these few sentences, and it's like, what, like that would make no, that would piss me off. I would be so mad if that
yeah,
was my first experience with prediction markets. So to me, if we're just thinking about customer satisfaction, like it cannot continue that we have these like rule clarifications and that are arbitrary, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, 100% agree too on that. Um, so I think we're on time. I
Yeah,
know you have to head out. It was great talking to you, Domer.
yeah,
I mean, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on at any time too. And yeah, it was great.
awesome, man. I appreciate it. Nice chatting with you.
Nice chatting.
Yeah.
Bye.